Hey, thanks for your support, Nathan. That was beautiful. Morning, everybody. There's so many more people here than when I first walked in the door, which is more than like 2. So good for you. Yay. As most of you know, my name is Sara-May. I'm the new youth pastor, so I'm across that weird hallway in the other building most of the time. And I'm really, really excited to be here. I know that it's new for me, it's probably new for you, and I'm really honored to be able to speak with you today, even though it's just because Pastor Dan's gone, and so someone had to do it. So here I am. So if you wouldn't mind just bowing your heads one more time with me. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to come together and worship you. And God, as I speak, help my words not to be mine, but yours. Thank you so much for loving us and being with us every second of the day. We love you in your name. Amen. Okay, so obviously the topic is universal majority, which, funny story, totally transferred that in my head to universal minority, and it confused the mess out of me. I was sitting there and I was like, universal minority, that's pretty epic, but what does it mean? And then I reread it and found out, oh, totally wrong. So universal majority, how cool is that? I am naturally, by design, a pretty scattered person, which makes it very entertaining for most people. For me, not so much, because I don't always know what's happening when I'm presenting something. But that's the cool thing about God, is God brings us in all our brokenness and all our messed up moments to his presence. And he says, you know what? It's cool. I can still use you. So when we're talking about the universal majority, this is no joke, my train of thought. I sat down. Okay, let me back up a second. So I have always been fixated on the New Testament. I don't know if you guys have ever been, because my theory was, because I'm ADHD, I was like, my theory is if I can just like master how Christ lived, then I get the Old Testament, right? So I don't have to get all complicated and like exegete all this stuff and memorize all this stuff and somehow come to a conclusion of how to live. Just follow Christ, right? So that was like my teenage train of thought, and I was like, yeah, totally. So I've been fixated my whole life on the New Testament, loving the stories of the Old Testament because they're quite gory and vivid, and that's awesome. But the New Testament, man, living Christ-like, oh, it's so good, so easy to just follow that instead of rules. So I've always been fixated on that. But then when I decided to go back into pastoring, I kind of decided that maybe I should reread the Old Testament for real. Not just for homework, not just because I feel like I should do the right thing, but because I wanted to actually experience the stories with it. So, I'm in 1 Samuel. How many of you guys have read 1 Samuel recently? Yes, awesome. It is ridiculous, okay? So I started there, 1 Samuel 1, and it's like this lady, she's standing in the temple. Eli is just watching her, and she is pouring out her heart to God. And she's saying, God, if only you would give me a son, I will do anything, and I will give him completely to you. So I'm thinking about this. This lady is like freaking out in the presence of God. She's barren, which in that time is like the only thing that matters, is whether you have offspring. She's standing there broken, humiliated, unable to even have a lineage. And she's begging God, if you just give me this son, I will give him to you forever. So she walks out. Most of you know the story. She goes home. She gets pregnant. And she waits for this child to be weaned. And then what does she do? She follows up on her word. How ridiculous is that? She like straight up marches up to the temple and she says, hey, Eli, you remember me? Do you remember that prayer I said? I said, God, I really need this child. And I said I'd give him to you. And so here's my son. He's weaned. He's ready. Now, mind you, I'm not a parent. But when I was moving across the country here, I was thinking about, because I was originally moving to Hawaii, and if I did, I might have had to give up one of my pets. And I was thinking, how can I do that? I can't just give up a chinchilla. Like, what will it do without me? Right? Kind of ridiculous. Okay, we're not talking about a chinchilla here, guys. We're talking about someone's child. Can you imagine, not just for a couple hours a week, but giving your child, your offspring that you prayed and pleaded with God for, over to a temple to serve? Because that's what you promised. That is ridiculous. And so that started me thinking, are we even capable of making ridiculous leaps of faith anymore? We look at the Old Testament, we look at the New Testament, we see all these epic things happening, and we're like, well, our life isn't exactly like that. But when we look at it, isn't it? Isn't it just like that? Except for we have taken out all the pieces of it, and we've made it so we can't even make this epic leap of faith. So sometimes we have to do illogical and crazy things on the basis of faith. But how do we justify this faith? And then I begin to ask myself, do I have enough faith to give God all that I have promised him? or even just believe that miracles could happen in my life today. And that floored me, guys. Sure, I'm a pastor. Sure, I'm supposed to have all this faith. Sure, I've been a chaplain for 5 years. I've dealt with death. That's what I specialize in. You would think I'd have faith at some point, right? But do I? Am I capable of making that step further? So I looked into the Bible and I thought, wow, there's a lot of life in the Bible. There's epic visuals of God and how he knocked down entire cities with just his presence. And then that moved me in my train of thought. Do I believe in God enough to stake my life on it and make these leaps of faith? So I look at 2 Kings 6:8, which, hey, magic. 2 Kings 6:8. It's a story that a lot of you have heard, but I'm actually going to read it because I don't want to mess it up, because it's just that good. So, now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place, which, by the way, that's funny because two things. One, now the king of Aram was at war with Israel, so clearly Israel was not at war with them, which makes no sense. Anyways, and then such and such a place, which is where we all go. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, will you not tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of the officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. That's freaky. Go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back. He is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, Oh, Lord, open his eyes so he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. 2 Kings 6:15 kind of blew my mind. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, my Lord, what shall we do? He cried. And Elisha prayed, Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. And when he did, what did he see? A hill full of fiery chariots protecting them. That's crazy. The rest of the story you can continue to read, but basically Elisha prays and the army goes blind and he leads them right into an enemy city. Beautiful, right? But the part I really want to focus on is that God opened their eyes and he saw all the chariots surrounding them. No wonder Elisha wasn't freaked out at all. And that is absolutely crazy. How often do we think we're alone and yet there are blazing chariots surrounding us? How often do we think we are fighting a battle against all the powers of distraction, jealousy, finances, and so on, all alone? But yet we're surrounded by an army of focus, love, and peace. How amazing and real is the God of the Bible? And that's when I had a second where I selfishly wondered, do I have that kind of faith? Am I truly surrounded by all these things? And do I really believe in miracles? Well, when it came down to it, I started looking back on my life. And this is kind of, like I said, my train of thought, literally, as I'm pulling myself together for this. And I started looking back on my life, and I started realizing all these incredible stories in my life that I had nothing to do with. But yet God was absolutely present and absolutely terrifyingly awesome. So I look back. Most of you guys know, because Pastor Dan is also a missionary kid, and I am also a missionary kid. So therefore, I have no identity. I have no clue where I'm from. So if you ask me, that is like the most confusing question I've ever had in my life. But here's a piece. When I lived in Moscow, Russia, we went there right after the Iron Curtain went down. So communism was just kind of petering out. I used to sneak out of the house when I was like 10 to go to a communist rally in Red Square and watch it all go down. You know, things that normal 10-year-olds do. And I was constantly getting myself into trouble. One of those things is that my parents worked a lot, they traveled a lot, so I had a lot of nannies, if you will, other missionaries that would just pop in to make sure I was still breathing and eating and, bathing, things that kids need advice on. And I remember one time I had left the house, I don't remember why, but I decided to go to the clinic, which is where a couple of my friends were, but they weren't even in town. And so I would go to the clinic on a regular basis because that's what cool kids do. They go hang out in a clinic. And there was this cool tunnel underneath, and I would make candles with crayons, like a cool person. And I did all these different things, and it was just like a very weird experience. But anyways, during all this time, we started having problems at the clinic. So I was actually told not to go there very often. Because here's the thing. When you're a Seventh-day Adventist Christian in a communist country, people hate you most of the time. And when I say people, I mean the mafia. And when I say the mafia, I really mean the mafia. And when I say the mafia, that includes KGB. So basically, my entire protective system is corrupt, and that is awesome. But here's the crazy part. We had a clinic, pretty cool sized clinic, lots of property we were going to expand. The mafia gets this brilliant idea where they're like, let's build these epic walls in between the back door and the rest of their property. So they put up these huge cement walls all the way around the clinic because for a year or two, they had been trying to tear down the clinic so that way we'd get kicked out of Moscow. They figured if we can't help anyone, if our money isn't, if we don't get money, we can't be there. So their new plan, instead of just tearing down the clinic, was let's build one right next door and make it better. So great business plan. Love it, right? So I watched them put up these walls. I watched them start construction. There's 5,000 stories in between there of me playing pranks on them, which was a horrible idea. And then this day comes where I'm at the clinic. I had left the house, got into the clinic, playing games. Suddenly, I feel the ground shaking. There aren't too many earthquakes in Russia, so that was unusual. So I go and I run up and I look out the window, and sure enough, there is a bulldozer, 100 and some men with weapons. There's a wrecking ball. Basically, all the construction stuff from next door and pretty much that entire side of Moscow was outside the clinic gate. And I went, oh no, what do I do? So of course, what any 10 or 11-year-old did, I ran up to the doctor and I hid behind him. Because I'm a professional at hiding. So I'm in the back, I'm hiding, I don't know what to do, and he says, guys, we just need to pray. So his family and I, we knelt down, and we said a prayer. And, it seems cliche to say that that's what we did, because, maybe we should fight or pull together a plan. But really, that was the only thing we could do at that moment. We were surrounded by the mafia and KGB, and they were clearly about to take down our building. At that point, we open our eyes and look around. And the doctor isn't in the circle anymore. So where'd he go? So we all run to the window. So we run to the window, we look out the window, and here's this guy. Let me describe this guy for you. He is shorter than me, very bald, adorable, but not a very muscular person. And so this little guy is let's go greet the mafia, right? Great idea, right? So he goes and he politely shuts the gate behind him. And so all we see is this guy with a sea of crazy people, and he's just standing there talking very calmly. And I remember thinking, this is a 10-year-old mindset, why would he do that? Clearly he's setting himself up for failure. And he stood there and he's talking, and as he talks, they say something, he responds, and finally he just crosses his hand and just says something, and that's it. We're all just... And then they start getting crazy faces. When I mean crazy faces, it's and then they start running. And the next thing I know, the men are gone, the wrecking machines are left there, and people are all running next door and hiding. And I was well, this is turn of events, very exciting. However, it's ridiculous, right? This little guy just scared them all away. And I was that's awesome, go Dr. B, woo. And he comes back in and he says, okay, I don't know what just happened, but let's pray. And we're what did you say? And he goes, well, I don't know. I just went out there and I said, if you want to take down the clinic, you'll have to go through me. And they left. And I was okay, let's pray. So we kneel down, we say a prayer, and as we're finishing that prayer, The phone rings, and Dr. B runs and he grabs it and he picks it up and he's like, hello? And then he was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? No, we didn't know. What? And he hangs up, and the craziest thing happened, guys. That was one of the guys from next door calling and say, how did you know we were coming today? And the next question, because we didn't know, was, so where did you get your army? Later, like 2 or 3 years later, I actually became friends with one of the mafia guys. That's another story. He was a younger guy, and he kept asking me why I kept going over there. And so we became friends. And so I was like, question, were you at that really horrible attack plan? And he was like, yeah, I was. And I was like, what did you see? Like, I just wanted to know what you saw. And he was like, I saw an army. And he was like, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Because one second, we're talking to the doctor. The next second, we look up, and you're surrounded. And he was like, it was crazy. And I was like, what? And he was like, didn't you see it? And I was like, no, I didn't see anything. He was like, that wasn't real. And so then I started thinking, I was like, this is ridiculous. I have experienced an Elisha moment, but I just didn't have my eyes opened. And how often am I standing, feeling very alone, feeling very abandoned, feeling like I'm the only one standing up for something, feeling like I'm the only one that is challenged to do something, yet I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by chariots of fire. I'm surrounded by an army protecting me. And that is a crazy, crazy thought. When I kept going in this train of thought, I started wondering, like, why I had never asked Dr. B how he felt. Did he feel alone? Did he see? Was he Elisha? Did his eyes open up so he knew what was there? Or did he go out there feeling alone, but with enough faith to take that illogical step forward and stand up for something that he truly believed in? And that is a question I will always regret not asking him. How much of my life has passed by me since I heard and saw these breathtaking miracles? Do I let those phenomenal moments stay in the past, begging for God to show himself in the present, like the children of Israel always did? Or do I remind myself of how great our God is and know the universe shows up to my life, and I am constantly surrounded by angelic hosts? In Ephesians 6:12, which should be up there because you probably aren't going to open your Bibles, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. These are things that we fight against. But then we go to 1 John 4:4. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. We are told that some of the most epic things we will wrestle with is not visible. So why do we continue to feel the need to see things? Well, it's pretty simple, right? Because we're human. It's what we do. We relapse constantly. We constantly need to be reminded who God is. And it keeps going in this constant circle, circle, circle. And then the funny thing is, when I started thinking about how visible I need everything to be, for example, I'm like a 90-year-old person. I use paper for sermons. I'm not a hip youth pastor. I don't use my iPad. No, because it freaks me out, because I don't know what's going to happen on it, right? Paper, I can control. So I look at this and I think about this, and I think about how we're cool with texting someone an important message, or the fact that I could magically hook up my computer to my wireless printer and no wires need to be connected, and I can press print, and it shows up over there exactly as planned, right? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with faxes. I'm okay with, like, cars that don't even need gasoline anymore. Like, I'm okay with all these things, but yet why am I not okay with God's presence not being visible? That's a freaky thing to think about. So, as most of you know, as I was driving across the country, I had a lot of time to think. And I was thinking about all the little miracles that can happen in my life that I don't give credit to. So I was thinking about these epic things that I can trust, like wireless things, and then this whole past life of God showing up in very incredible ways. But then I think about the little things that I didn't even thank God for. For example, because you're stuck being my audience, I can say this. I got granite countertops in my apartment. Okay, when I rented that apartment, it was like almost wood. Like, it was like that weird laminate stuff. But they accidentally renovated it while I was gone, because I was a week later than they thought, and so they renovated it. So I got these amazing granite countertops for no reason. I have always said the only thing that I'm missing in life is a granite countertop. That's pretty awesome, if you ask me, because that's like a little high five from God. Like, hey, way to drive across the country, move to California, become a pastor, high five, granite countertops, right? That may not be like the super miracle, but for me, that was a pretty big deal. And how often do we step over those amazing little things that just give us little high fives and nudges like, dude, I've been listening the whole time. And I got people all around you. That's not anything I prayed for when I moved here. That was something I asked for like 6 years ago when I got my first apartment. That's pretty cool. And so I continue to look at this, and I continue to ask myself, is my faith really real? Am I even capable of making ridiculous leaps of faith? Do I believe good things will happen, but do I believe because I genuinely believe it's true and have a conviction? Or is it because I expect a result? Faith is not a transaction. Faith is an action. As I was thinking of an action in faith, as I was thinking about these ridiculous leaps of faith, I thought about Charles Blondin. Have you guys ever heard of this guy? Did I say his name right? The guy who crossed Niagara Falls on a tightrope, right? He did it like 8 times or something ridiculous. Like one time he even cooked an omelet. I don't even know. I can't even walk in a straight line when I have the whole room to myself. Like this guy cooked an omelet crossing Niagara Falls. And then one time he decided to push a wheelbarrow, like any normal person. That's what you do when you're tightroping. So he's pushing this wheelbarrow across Niagara Falls. It's like a quarter of a mile or something. And he pushes it, and everyone's cheering on the sides. Woo, Charles Blondin, he's amazing. He's cooked an omelet before. This is nothing. Carry on, man. He on their side, and so excited that he made it. And they're just cheering. It's an uproar. And then he was like, I have a question. And everyone becomes silent. I have a question, he says. Everyone's like, what? He's like, do you believe that I could push someone in the wheelbarrow across Niagara Falls? And everyone's like, yeah, totally, absolutely. And the crowd's going wild, and he's like, okay, get in. Guess how many people volunteered for that? Nobody. Not even one. Nobody volunteered. They were so excited that he could do it, and they had complete faith he could do it, but when it came into the action of getting into the wheelbarrow to trust him to actually do it, they wouldn't get in the wheelbarrow. The story goes on that years later, finally, his publicist was like, all right, I'll do it, after he'd seen like 30 crosses or something crazy. But how often do we make it a transaction and not an action when it comes to faith? And this is something that continues to plague me, because as someone that claims that they have their life in ministry, and they claim that they're a Christian, and they claim that they're supposed to be doing what they're doing, and I believe in Adventism, and I believe in Christianity, and I believe in God, how often is it just because I want a transaction? It's because I want a gift right now. Hand it over, God. Thanks. I want granite countertops. Or is it something that I'm actually capable of making this incredible leap of faith and step forward like Dr. B and stand in front of a crowd of mafia trying to take down your clinic and say, if you want to tear down that, you have to go through me first, knowing that you're not alone. As I thought about this amazing woman who everyone uses wrongly sometimes, Ellen White. She says in one of her books, in all ages, angels have been near to Christ's faithful followers. The vast confederacy of evil is arrayed against all who would overcome. But Christ would have us look to the things which are not seen, to the armies of heaven encamped about all who love God to deliver them. From what dangers, seen and unseen, we have been preserved through the interposition of the angels. We shall never know until, in the light of eternity, we see the providences of God. Then we shall know that the whole family of heaven was interested in the family here below, and that messengers from the throne of God attended our steps from day to day. Are we even capable of making ridiculous leaps of faith? John 14:6 says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So the answer is, you're not. But I am.